Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kiali community meeting. We are presenting Sprint 11 from 2025, and we will be releasing Kiali version 2.14 on this Monday. So this is our agenda. As always, we will go through these sprint release highlights. Then we will see a preview for the next sprint. And last, we will have our community discussion. So here we can see a summary of all the issues done and that are work in progress of this sprint by repository. As always, the main issues have been done in the Kiali. Still, we have some in progress and some 3 epics in progress as well. And let's go with our sprint highlights. One of them is the external Kiali deployment model. And for this, I'm going to let Jay to talk about it.
Thanks, Jasune. So just looking at the slide first, and then maybe do a very quick demo. What we're introducing in this release is the ability to have an external Kiali deployment, which is sort of analogous to having an Istio control plane external deployment, which is something that's been supported in Istio for some time. But the idea is basically the same. It's to be able to take, in this case, Kiali, but potentially all of your management components and have what you might want to establish like a management cluster. So to take the resources needed for your observability and move it over, so you can have the management done over there, you can do the admin on another cluster, and the resources that you use to run observability are not going to affect the resources that you use for your mesh itself. And so you're not going to have the control plane or the apps losing CPU and memory and so forth to the management stuff. The way that that's done is fairly simple. You're just going to, actually, maybe I'll do that in the demo. So let me show that out. So what you can see is in the overview page here, we've got 2 clusters. You can see that there's both a mesh cluster and a management cluster. And if you look at the book info card, you'll notice that book info itself is deployed in my mesh cluster. But if we look over at Istio system, the 2 cards in the middle here, we've got 2 of them. One is on the mesh cluster, one is on the management cluster. And only the one on the mesh is labeled as the control plane, because that's where Istio is actually running. On the management side, the only thing that's really running in Istio system is Kiali. And it didn't actually have to be named Istio system. It was probably a little bit confusing. It could be named something else. That just happens to be the default. So let me just swap over to the mesh page. If we look at the mesh page, this kind of makes it easier to see the visualization of how it's set up. We've got 2 clusters. You see Kiali's over here on its own, just running the management cluster, or just running in the management cluster, connected to Prometheus as usual, and also talking to Istio D, which is the control plane, and that one is on the mesh cluster, and it's talking to book info. So we've kind of got this separation of concerns where we've got management running in one place and we've got mesh running in another. And that's sort of the crux of the whole situation. For Kiali to do this, it's fairly straightforward. You're just going to declare in the CR this new field called ignore home cluster, which basically tells Kiali you're not going to be managing an Istio D on your cluster. Everything else is roughly the same. It's documented on kiali.io, or it will be when the next release goes out, and you can look into it more there. Thanks.
Thank you, Jay, and thanks for the demo. So another feature highlight is related to Ambient, and this is that we have included a new Add to Ambient management button, and well, we are putting more focus in the observability and troubleshooting features, but this was like a smallest exception for this management feature. To have more parity with the ambient mesh and with sidecars. And if you know about this enable auto injection feature, is like a menu option in our car namespace for when the namespace is not added into the mesh. So we don't really need to know what is the injection labels that we need to add or to include this workload or this namespace in the mesh. So when we are in an ambient mesh and there is a namespace that is not part of any mesh or ambient sidecars, so we have included this add to ambient button that it will add this namespace to ambient mesh. And with ambient it's more easier because you don't even need to restart this namespace because all the workloads will include automatically the redirection label and will be redirecting its traffic through the cTunnel. And well, this is only going to appear when this namespace is not part of any of the mesh yet. Another feature to highlight is a feature complete related to the support for the Kubernetes Gateway API inference extension. This is an extension of the Gateway API, and it was presented for Hike in the previous sprint. But in this sprint, he was continue working on this, and now we have the possibility of visualize this inference pool Istio config objects as part of the Istio configurations. And it also, we are also going to be able to see the reference for when these objects are referencing some HTTP routes. As you can see there in the reference, there are other objects included there. In this case, it was this HTTP route, so it's easier to know all the Istio configurations that are related with each others. And this is another feature that is still a work in progress, probably could be released in this sprint. And this is related to validations for ambient. And this feature, it aims to help us troubleshooting issues related to our label configuration in ambient. So for example, this feature is going to warn us when we have a label for Istio injection and also for ambient in our namespace or in our workloads. And another example, for example, could be when we have a use waypoint label, but the waypoint does not exist. So it's going to help us understand and troubleshoot problems related with the infrastructure. Because now if we have ambient, we can have labels into the workloads that are overriding the namespace labels. We can have labels related to ambient to the data plane, but to the layer 4 for including and having the traffic redirected through layer 4, but we can also have labels related to waypoints. So it can be more difficult to manage, and it is possible that we can have more errors that we are not realizing. So with these validation rules, Kiali tries to help you with this ambient configuration. So let's go to other notable changes related to Gateway API. There was an upgrade to the version 1.3.0. There's been some refactoring down to remove some global variables in the business package. We've been working validating Kiali with Istio Ambient in Istio 1.27, but in the beta version. This week, it was published a release candidate for 1.27, but the official release probably will be published next week. But we wanted to make sure everything is working, at least for this beta version. There was some bump of the library GoHose to version 4, and we wanted to thank a contributor from the community, which is Sirain. Also, there was been some upgrades in the front-end dependencies. And another important change was to detect the monitoring port for each control plane. So previous to this, the monitoring port should be set in the configuration when the Istio was not having the monitoring port as the default. But now Kiali is going to auto-discover this port. So there is not going to be any need to modify anything in the configuration if the default port is changing. And also is going to discover this port in all the control planes that Kiali has access to. And for this, also it was removed some duplicate configurations related to external services.istio. Some other notable changes, in this case, they are all related to the continuous integration. One was to expose the Kiali logs for debugging purposes. So it's going to be easier to understand any issues in any failures for the logs. It was also included a log to describe deployments or pods when there's some failure in the smoke tests. We have modified the GitHub job to run the jobs in Ambient, all the tests in Ambient with the sail operator. Instead, previous of that, Istio was installed using the Istio Cattle, but it was modified to use a sail operator, and I think now all of these jobs are running sail. And the last one was to add a new parameter to modify the resource memory when the hack scripts are using keyclock, because it was enough for when you run these scripts in some operative systems. And what happened was that the keyclock pod was not starting. And one bug fix, Kiali was not recognizing the Istio remote gateway class, and for this fix, it was disabled the auto discovery of gateways in cluster scope, but when the cluster-wide access is disabled. So this is a preview of some of the items for the next sprint that would be targeted for the 29th of August. We have some backlog items, which of them are unassigned, like, for example, the upgrade to TypeScript 5 or the validation of Kiali with Istio Ambient in multi-cluster, because this feature probably would be supported in Istio 1.27. And we still have some epics in progress, and there was some work that was still in progress for other previous sprints, like, for example, the external Kiali support, and also provide an schema for the Kiali CRDs, and as well as the ambient support for, in this case, Istio 1.27. And here you have a link to the Kiali project in case you want more information about this. And now let's start our community discussion. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all, and see you in the next sprint.